Hello students, welcome to the channel. In this video, we'll discuss the third passage of the reading section of the May 2021 International SAT. This is a science passage. This passage is adapted from Elizabeth Pennisi, How Birds Got Their Beaks. Agile beaks of all shapes and sizes, from the gulping gape of a pelican to the needle nose of a hummingbird, have enabled the 10,000 avian species to thrive from the Arctic to the tropics, build intricate nests, and eat many different foods. Now, researchers may have identified genes that transformed an ancestral snout into a bird's bill. By manipulating the gene's proteins, they have seemingly turned back the evolutionary clock, producing snouts in developing chicken embryos that resemble those of alligators today. We are trying to explain evolution through developmental studies, says Harvard University evolutionary biologist Arhat Abzanov, who, with his colleagues, describes the work in evolution. So the introductory paragraphs basically describe the purpose of beaks, the varied purposes that beaks serve in birds, from building nests to eating different kinds of foods. And the second paragraph talks about this Harvard evolutionary scientist who is interested in the evolutionary history of beak development, how it happened, and how an ancestral snout was transformed into the beak of the bird, right? And they have turned back the evolutionary clock by manipulating the genes, proteins, and they've had chicken embryos producing snouts, right? So they've kind of gone back in evolutionary time that way. Their conclusions are at odds with an earlier study, but even those who disagree with the result, say Abrizhnov and Bharat Anjan Bhullar, now a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Chicago, have demonstrated a powerful approach, pinning down how anatomy changes using fossils, then trying to recapitulate the changes in the lab by tinkering with genetic signals. The value of this paper is their ability to blend paleontology with evolutionary developmental biology, says Richard Schneider at the University of California, San Francisco, who has linked beak evolution to different genes. So this paragraph tells you the impact of this study, right? And while their conclusions are at odds with earlier studies, one thing that has really been learned from this experiment that Abzanov and his and the postdoctoral fellow Bhullar did was that you could actually collect fossils and you could manipulate genes to see how anatomy developed over time, over evolutionary time, right? So that process, which has a huge impact and which can have huge implications for um, evolutionary understanding of animals and how anatomy changes, that is the real sort of impact of this study. In ancestral reptiles, a pair of small bones makes up the tip of the snout. In today's birds, those premaxillary bones are long, narrow, and fused, producing the upper bill. The ancient bird Archaeopteryx reveals an intermediate step. Its premaxillary bones were not very expanded, but in later avian species, the bones are progressively more fused. Other work had also implicated the premaxillary bones in beak evolution. So this kind of describes how the snout of the reptile converted into the beak of today's birds, right? So there was the tip of the snout was made up of these small bones in ancient ancestral reptiles, but today we find that those bones are fused, right? So they're kind of, bunched together, they come together. And there is the ancient bird Archaeopteryx, which reveals sort of an intermediate step between the reptile snout and today's bird beak. Right? So that's what the paragraph describes. So Bhullar searched for earlier studies of genetic pathways that control development of these bones. Work in mice and chickens had implicated two sets of signals, a gene called fibroblast growth factor 8 FGF8 becomes active in the front part of the face as it takes shape in 3-day-old chick embryos. Later, just before bones form, a gene called WNT helps drive the proliferation of cells in the middle of the face, where it may prompt expansion of the premaxillary bones. In mammals, lizards, turtles, and alligators, in contrast, activity of the WNT gene is highest on the sides of the embryonic face. So this basically tells you how the gene WNT um, kind of determines where the activity of this gene determines how cells will proliferate to create what is the beak in the bird, right? So it is seen that the fibroblast growth factor becomes active in the front of the face in the 3-day-old chick, but later as the bones begin to form, the WNT focuses the proliferation of cells in the middle of the face, right, which is where the beak is formed. But in other animals, in mammals, the WNT for the activity of the gene is focused on the side of the embryonic face, right? So that is where bird anatomy differs from the anatomy of other animals. To explore these genes' role, Puller and Abzanov treated bird embryos with inhibitors of the WNT and FGF8 proteins. When the two signals were curbed, the premaxillary bones became round and never fused, as in birds' dinosaur relatives, instead of growing long and pointy. So, so if they inhibited those genes, then they found that the fusing of the premaxillary bones that happens in birds did not happen. They did not grow long and pointy, rather they became round. To the pair's surprise, a palatal bone, which makes up the roof of the mouth, also changed dramatically. In many vertebrates, this bone is flat and fused to surrounding bones, but in birds, it is reduced and disconnected, which frees the top part of the bill to move upward, expanding bird's gape. In the treated chick embryos, the palate looked more like it does in other vertebrates, flat and seemingly reconnected to jaw bones. The studies suggest that FGF8 and WNT signaling changes allowed skulls of ancient birds to evolve in a whole new direction and form a beak, Abzanov says, right? So the other interesting finding from this experiment was that when they inhibited WNT and FGF8 proteins, the researchers found that the palatal bone, right, which is the bone in the roof of the mouth, which is not connected to the jaw structure in birds, but is connected to the jaw structure in vertebrates, it actually started behaving as it does in vertebrates, right? And that kind of indicates that the way ancient birds, right, which came from reptiles and dinosaurs, the way they might have evolved to have the beak of today and this kind of unconnected palatal bone of today, that is explained through this pathway. Not everyone agrees. In 2014, UCSF's Nathan Young and Ralph Marcuscio, working with Schneider, carried out extensive skull measurements on a variety of embryonic vertebrates and determined the point during development at which the bird face begins to diverge from those of other vertebrates. The work and later experiments supported a 2009 idea proposed by Marcuccio that the activity of another gene, SHH for sonic hedgehog, was critical for forming the beak. Unlike FGF8, he says it's active in the right place and right time in bird embryos. So this paragraph kind of brings in a different perspective from another set of researchers who said that there was another gene, the SHH, which was critical for forming the beak. And it was this gene which was responsible for the beak formation because of its presence at the right place and the right time. Marcuccio, a developmental biologist, also worries that the changes in facial structure observed by the Harvard team may stem from unintended cell death caused by the inhibitors they used. Adding the fossil record to this work is really an important step, but I think they are just looking at the wrong pathway, he says. Abzanov and Puller counter that FGF8 and SHS are often co-expressed and may work together. So, so Marcuccio's criticism stems from the fact that he says when you inhibited FGF8 and what was the other one? WNT. When you inhibited those, then it may have resulted in unintended cell death, and that may have gotten you the results that you said are the results that you say are caused by the pathways that you have described, right? The FGFA WNT pathway. So again, he says, the big implication of the study that you're adding fossil record to the work, that's really important, but you're looking at the wrong pathway. And to that, again, the Harvard team counters that FGF8 and SHH are co-expressed, and so they may work together. Okay, so a lot to unpack in this passage. Let's begin. The primary purpose of the passage is to present research that validates earlier studies about the evolution of beaks in a particular species of bird, suggests that alligators were the ancestor of several species of birds, discuss a study that provides an explanation of how a bird's beak has evolved from an ancestral snout, critique the approach a research team used to study the development of beak formation in chicken embryos. Okay, so the right answer for this question has to be C, right? Because we are discussing the Harvard study, and the purpose of the Harvard study is to kind of look at how the ancestral snout converted into a beak in the case of birds. Option A is wrong because this research actually does not validate other studies, right? Categorically stated in the passage that the conclusions were at odds with earlier studies, right? So A is wrong. Suggests that alligators were the ancestor of several species of birds. That's not the focus of the passage. The focus on the passage is on the development of the reptilian snout into the bird's beak. Option D, critique the approach a research team used to study the development of beak formation in chicken embryos. So firstly, chicken embryos is part of the research. So that is not what is critiqued, right? The use of chicken embryos is not critiqued. What is critiqued is the conclusion that they reach about the genetic pathway, right? And that also is not like the main focus. The main focus is to present the study. The critique comes later. So D is out. According to the passage, the ancient bird Archaeopteryx is significant to the evolution of beaks in birds because based on the fossil record, the facial structure of Archaeopteryx provides evidence of the existence of an evolutionary step between a snout and a beak, possesses physical characteristics directly linking them to present-day alligators, identifies them as one of the oldest birds to have had a beak, reveals them to be one of the earliest birds to have fused facial bones. So it's A, right? Because here it's given that the ancient bird Archaeopteryx reveals an intermediate step. Its premaxillary bones were not very expanded, but in later avian species, the bones were progressively more fused, right? So the open-ended snout of the reptile became the fused premaxillary bones of the beak of today's bird, and the Archaeopteryx was the intermediate. So it provides evidence for the existence of an evolutionary step between a snout and a beak, right? So A. What evidence in the passage best supports the hypothesis that the presence of WNT and FGF8 proteins during embryonic development is necessary for the formation of beaks? Okay, so 37 to 38, let's just mark those first. Okay, 46 to 48. Yeah. 49 to 51. Okay. And 51 to 54. So what the presence of WNT and FGF8 proteins is necessary for the formation of beaks? So the first option, they searched for earlier studies of genetic pathways. So this is just introducing the idea, so that can't be the answer. In mammals, lizards, turtles, activity is highest on the sides of the embryonic phase. So this talks about other animals. So again, we need to look at evidence for formation of beaks. So this is not correct. To explore these genes roles, Buller and Abruzov treated bird embryos with inhibitors. So this is what they did, right? And the result of this would be the evidence, right? When the two signals were curved, the premaxillary bones became round and never fused, as in birds' dinosaur relatives, instead of growing long and pointy. So the result of the inhibiting of WNT and FGF8 tells us that the formation of beaks is dependent upon that pathway. As used in line 52, curved most nearly means when the two signals were curved, when the two signals were suppressed, right? Those two signals were not allowed to express themselves, they were suppressed. To evade is to kind of run away from something, so that can't be used for genetic signals. Anchored is to, to anchor, like to anchor a boat to the harbor, so that doesn't fit the context. Neither does contained. As used in line 32, step most nearly means 32. Intermediate step, right? It reveals an intermediate step, the Archaeopteryx. An intermediate stage, right? It's a stage between the reptilian snout and the bird beak of today. It's not a procedure. It's not distance. It's not movement. Okay, according to the passage, the earlier studies that Buller consulted were important primarily because they confirmed when beak formation in an embryonic bird typically begins, identified particular genes that could initiate beak formation in birds, proved that beak formation in birds was a response to external conditions, pinpointed the primary gene that activates the development of a bird's beak. So I'm leaning towards A, but I'm just going to confirm this. Where is, yeah. Buller searched for earlier studies of genetic pathways that controlled development of these bones. Okay, so he did get genetic pathways from earlier studies, which was when he heard about two sets of signals, FG, F8, and WNT. So it's not A. Buller studies, identified particular genes that could initiate bird formation. Yeah, it is not the primary gene because it was these two pathways that were found, right? So it was not this one primary gene, it was these two pathways. So B is the best answer. It identified particular genes. Okay, 27, the passage shifts focus in the 8th paragraph from a consideration of Buller and Asbanov's research to so this is 67 to 70, 77 here. So here is like a critique of them, of their research, right? And other possible explanations. So it shifts from a consideration of the research to a sketch of an experiment to confirm that research, discussion of a possible challenge to that research, defense of the ultimate usefulness of that research, summary of a study disproving that research. So it's definitely not A and C. It's not disproving that research, right? It is not saying that that research itself is wrong, but it is definitely coming up with a challenge. So I would prefer an option which says challenge rather than disprove. This I think is somewhat extreme, right? So option B is better. Based on the passage, Marcuccio's response to which of the following questions would most likely differ from Asbanov's? Is there evidence that birds are related to alligators? How are bird beaks different from alligator snouts? What triggered the anatomical change from snouts to beaks? When did the evolution of contemporary bird beaks begin? So I think it's C, right? Because according to him, the SHH is responsible for this anatomical change and not FGF8. So let's just confirm 67. Not everyone agrees. So that's not good evidence. It doesn't tell us anything. 67 to 72. This one till here. 72 to 76. this one till here, and 78 to 81. Okay. So yeah, so I think, yeah, okay. So in 2014, UCSF's Nathan Young and Marcuccio, working with Schneider, carried out extensive skull measurements. So this is what they did again, right? This is describing what they did, but the results is what we are interested in. The work and later experiments supported a 2009 idea that the activity of another gene was critical to forming the beak, right? So it is SHH, which is responsible for forming the beak. So the anatomical change was triggered by the presence of another gene, right? Option D is kind of saying what could have been the problem with the research that the Harvard team did, right? So that's not the option we are looking at, because we're looking at why Marcuccio differs from the conclusion that Abzunov reached, right? The last paragraph mainly functions too. So the last paragraph kind of brings out another problem with the experiment. In fact, this is quite a serious charge that Marcuccio has made, because he's kind of saying that the results of the experiment were influenced by the experiment itself, right? And that should not happen in a scientific experiment. So this is a serious charge. And the rebuttal, right? So the last paragraph functions to offer an alternative interpretation of Abzunov and Bhulla's evidence as described in the passage, preview upcoming research that may support the findings of the study, imply that the sponsors of the study analyzed in the passage might have influenced its results, challenge the underlying intentions of the researchers described in the passage. So I don't think he's challenging the intentions or he's previewing upcoming research. Yeah. The sponsors of the study analyzed in the passage. Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out, it says, he worries that the changes in facial structure observed by the team may stem from unintended cell death caused by the inhibitors they used. So they used inhibitors, and that may have led to the changes, right? So this is an alternative interpretation. So A is a good answer. Imply that the sponsors of the study analyzed in the passage might have influenced. I don't think sponsors have anything to do with it, right? That's just not right. So I'll go with A, right? A is like a good answer. Okay, so that was question 21 to 30. So let's grade it. 21 to 30, CADB. CADB, okay. 24, okay. And then ABBC, ABBC, and 29, CA. CA. Okay, so we got all 10 questions correct. Hope this exercise was useful. If it was, hit like and subscribe to the channel. I have put the links for all the other solution sets that I've uploaded in recent days in the description box, so do check those out. I'll see you guys in a new video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.